Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So today we're coming together to discuss the life and the example of one of the most amazing individuals in world history. And so, you know, we read a lot about the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, and I would say most Muslims have a pretty good grasp of most of the general life of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of chronological events and stories and so forth. So I think one of the most amazing, you know, people always ask me, Imam John, how did you become Muslim? And I've come to a conclusion that my story is a very minuscule story when you compare it with these people from the Prophet ﷺ's companions. Their story of how they become Muslim and then what became of them and how did they affect the world is manifold, more important and amazing than anything that I could offer. So when we look at the closest people to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in his life, who do you think about? What's the first name when you think the closest person to the Prophet ﷺ? Everybody always thinks of Abu Bakr, right? Because even before the Prophet ﷺ received revelation, he kind of grew up around him and they knew each other, and Abu Bakr noticed his character and everything before he had received any revelation. But probably the person that historically was most intensely connected is Khadija radiallahu anha. She carried his 6 children, and they were married for many years until her unfortunate passing radiallahu anha. But then after that, there are 2 people who lived in the house of the Prophet ﷺ that he was deeply close to them, and they had a very loving connection bond. And he kind of both looked them and took them in as a son. So one of those is Zayd ibn Haritha, who was originally a servant that Khadija had given as a gift to the Prophet ﷺ. And then later, as we saw, when Zayd's own uncle came and his father came for the Hajj, that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Your family is here, they spoke to me. If you want to go back, then you have all means, go ahead and do that." And then he thought about it and he said, "Really, I only know one family and that's you." So imagine somebody who was a quote-unquote slave. I'm pretty sure if you looked at American history and you talked about the slaves there, if at any point somebody knew they could go back to their own family, other than the slave life they were living in, the masters they had, I think very rarely would you have ever gotten a response like, "Oh yeah, my master's here, I want to stay in this situation," right? So that was that. And then the other one was the one we're going to talk about today, and is Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. And we'll talk in a short while about how he ended up living with him and so forth. So first we want to look at what the Prophet ﷺ said towards the end of his life about guiding the ummah. He said, "Alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnat al-khulafa al-rashidin al-mahdiyyin min ba'di." So he said, it is incumbent upon you to follow my example, the way I live my life and what I do as a believer and as a prophet. You should follow that. And in addition to that, you should follow those rightly guided people who come after me. And then he said, "Addu alayha tamassaku biha wa addu alayha bin nawajid." Stick firmly to it, and then he says like you're biting onto it, right? And this is what we call kinaya in Arabic. It's a metaphor meaning stick very close to it like your life depended on it, is really what that means. And so then he said, "Khilafatun nubuwa 30 sana ba'di." He made a prophecy. He spoke to people and he said, after me there will be people who will follow my example for 30 years. ثُمَّ يُؤْتِ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ مَن يَشَاءُ. Then Allah, He will give the dominion or the authority to whoever He wills. And in some of the other narration, it's like a kingdom type thing. And so he predicted this, and it happened exactly as he said it. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. If I'm not mistaken, you can help me if I think about 2.5 years after the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr was the Khalifa. And he brought everybody back together after a big turmoil of confusion of identity and this whole idea, what they've gone from tribalism to this nation state, and all of that was a big Who was the reason? Why should we do this? And Abu Bakr went through 2.5 years of very difficult circumstances and was able to bring everything back together. He knew that the situation was very tense and difficult, and so he encouraged a lot of his companions and took their advice. I think I will pick Umar to be the one who will lead after me. And everybody except for a small handful that feared that Umar might be a little bit tough, they said, I think that's good. And then once he wrote the letter and before he passed away, everybody took Umar radiallahu anh as the leader. If I'm not mistaken, Umar was about 10 years, the Khalifa. So it would be 12 years. Okay? And so then I think after that was Uthman radiallahu anhu was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, like 12 years. Something like this, isn't it? And then Ali radiallahu anhu was like 6 years. And then his son, Hassan, actually became the Khalifa for almost 8 months. If you add all those numbers up, and I may have done some injustice to it, because the scholars who did do this, the scholars of history, they said it came out to right at 30, and then some debated about the time of Uthman, if I'm not mistaken, and they said that there was 2 years missing, and they added that to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, who came later. So, but either way, whether it's 28 or 30 years, that is amazing that the Prophet ﷺ picked an exact number of years in which there would be people who would follow his example, and then he talked about how it would go on after that. So that's talking about the last rightly guided caliph, and there's all kind of things that are going to come up in this story. It's going to take us probably until next Ramadan until we finish this book. But it will be a very, very valuable journey in learning great lessons about individual piety and character and fortitude and steadfastness and virtue and all that. And then as a collective, the pitfalls and the shortcomings of trying to stick with the Jama'ah and trying to form a consensus and trying to understand priorities and so forth. We learn huge lessons from this. So Ali ibn Abi Talib, who can tell me who is Abi Talib to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He's his uncle. The Prophet's dad is named what? Abdullah. His brother is Abu Talib. Abu Talib is a kunya. You know what kunya means? Father of so and so. Meaning what? Talib is what? His oldest son. His oldest son. That's how they have it, right? So what's his real name? What was Abu Talib's name? We're going into the trivia style. Abd Manaf. So Abu Talib's name was Abd Manaf, and Ali radiallahu anhu was his son, right? So obviously, you might be saying, well, we said that Ali was so close to him. Well, Zayd and Khadija, they lived in the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So who knows what Ali was originally named? This is some interesting things I learned myself when I was researching this. His name was Asad. Haidar, yeah, but Asad is the name. And so his mother is Fatima, and she is the daughter of Haidar, right? Or father of Asad. So which Haidar, there's like Layth, there's like literally 20 names for a lion in Arabic. And so when she gave birth, Abu Talib was on a journey. He was gone. Because the Arab culture was the men have the final say, right, in everything. And so when she gave birth to Ali, she wanted to call him Asad, just like her dad. And so then, when Abu Talib came back, he said, I don't like this name, And so he said, I want to call him Ali. Now what does Ali mean?
High. Elevated.
Elevated, exalted, high, on a lofty position, right? Ali. Okay? So, where do you know the word Ali from? Where is the most prominent? Asma'ullah al-Husna, right? وَهُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمُ, which is the end of which ayah? Ayatul Kursi. Yeah, he is the most high and most exalted, most grand, right? So, could we say that it is haram for someone to be named from the Asma'ullah al-Husna unless they put Abd in front of it? Could we say that?
Isn't it? Since Asma'ullah al-Husna, they all have the. It says Alif Lam.
Very good point. So you have Alif Lam al-Ta'rif. It gives, they call it istighraq al-ma'na. Right? When we say Alhamdu, you might wonder why in the translation they're putting all praise and thanks. Where did all come in? The word kullu or jami'a is not there, which means all and collectively, right? But they're saying that this alif wal lam, it's referring to a type of praise that is complete, and it is every type of praise that ever could exist. Alhamdu. Okay? And so, Al-Ali is the absolute most exalted in every way you can look at the word exalted or high. High cannot, it may mean a place, but it could mean in category and way and style and all of that, right? The highest, okay? So, to name a person Al-Ali would be very strange, if not haram, okay? But you could refer to someone as Al-Rajul Al-Kareem, or Al-Rajul Al-Ali fi kitabatihi, you know? He has a, high standard of doing whatever he do. So basically the scholar said the only two real names or descriptions, I like to call them descriptions because they're all descriptions at the end of the day, is Allah and Rahman. Because Allah is the supreme being, creator of the universe, and it actually has Alif Lam built into it anyways. So you can't use that one. Rahman is like the source of all beneficence and mercy, compassion and love and all of that. So no one can be that. People can be Rahim, the one who has that quality and sometimes does it and sometimes live by it. You can be Rahim, but there's only one Rahman, right? So there's nothing wrong with him being called Ali. I think we solved that one. So what is his kunya? What was he called by most people? Abul Hasan, Abul Hasan, Al Hasan, wa Al Hussein, the good and the little good. So that's what he was famously called as well. He was also known as Abu Turab. You know about that? Abu Turab, what does that mean?
Dirt.
The father of dirt. So what happened was that, and he loved, by the way, Ali, he preferred that the Prophet ﷺ call him by this name. The Prophet ﷺ often called him Abu Turab, the father of dirt. Because one time, Fatima is telling us the story, radiyallahu anha. She said the Prophet ﷺ came to my house and he's looking for Ali, radiyallahu. And Ali was not there because we had some dispute and I got angry and he just decided to leave. And the Prophet ﷺ went around looking, where is Ali? And then he found him in the mosque. And then he was laying down on the dirt. Because in the mosque back then, they didn't have carpets. It was just dirt. And that's why they're all wearing their shoes in the mosque. Prophet ﷺ and his companions, they prayed in their shoes all the time. Because there was no carpet. Why are we taking our shoes off? Not because it's haram to pray in your shoes. Because we have a nice carpet we want to keep clean. Right? So he found him in there laying down, and then the dirt is imprinted on his face and his body. So when he gets up, he says, Abu Turab, it's just like a way of, talking with him in a playful way. And because this happened, once in a while, periodically, Ali would take some time in the mosque to take some nap and relax and get away from the struggles of his life. And so the dirt would stick to his face. And so that's why he was given the nickname Abu Turab. But what is his most famous laqab? It started with Umar al-Khattab. Uthman was not really known by it that much, but they call him Amir al-Mu'mineen. He is the leader of the believers. It was because his style of leadership was always very strong. He was a very strong man of leadership, of opinion, of wisdom, of character. And he was someone that, people would really move to his decision-making process. People would really respect his authority. So he became known as Amir al-Mu'mineen. So who knows when he was born? So there's a few different narrations. Some said 5 years, some said 10 years, some said 15 years before the prophethood, before the Prophet ﷺ received revelations. But the strongest opinion was that he was 10 years because that's when he became Muslim. And we know that he was one of the first few people that became Muslim. And so, where was he born? He was born inside the Kaaba. His mother gave birth to him inside the Kaaba. That's why some strange, misguided groups had some strange ideas about Ali and was Gabriel going to the right source and all of that. And so the one born in the Kaaba and all of this. This is obviously nonsense. But that definitely holds to the way his family held in the Banu Hashim or the Quraysh. They held a very respectful place, because not anyone can just go into the Kaaba and give birth. That was not like just something afforded to any, what we would say, Tom, Dick, or Harry that lives in Mecca. So he comes from a very respectful lineage. So he was born inside of the Kaaba, and Abu Talib, when we look at his dad and his relationship with the Prophet ﷺ starting off, Abu Talib was a very old man, and he had 5 kids. Each one of them had 10 years between them. It's very strange, right? And so Ali is kind of towards the end here. He's the second to last. And so his dad was quite old, and he wasn't a really super successful businessman, and he just was kind of like taking care of some camels and sheep. So that's his financial situation. He was of the least wealthy from the children of Abdul Muttalib. He was from the least wealthy among them, because you have, Hamza and Abbas and Abu Lahab. So all of these guys were much more wealthy. But Abu Talib was respected as a man of reason, as a man of morality, as a man of character. Amongst all of the respected elders of Quraysh, he was perhaps one that was respected for his moral standing. And so after Abdul Muttalib passed away, the Prophet ﷺ stayed in the house of Abu Talib, because he was an orphan. His father and mother had passed away. So Abu Talib took him in, and he raised him in his house and all of that, long before Ali was born. And so as the Prophet ﷺ was took care of and nurtured and comforted by this man, after he got married to Khadija radiallahu anha and everything, there was a big azma that hit Banu Hashim and the leaders of the Quraysh. They had a big financial problem, they had a drought, they had some circumstances that financially they were struggling very bad. And so Abu Talib is an old man at this point, and he has 5 children. And so, one of them is old enough, he's got his family and all of that, but others of them are young, and they're 10, 20, and things like this. And so, he has Ja'far and Ali in the house. And so Abbas and the Prophet ﷺ were talking, and they said, you know what, the Prophet ﷺ told Abbas, he said, you know what, I think we should help out Abu Talib, because he's struggling right now, and he has enough for him and his wife, but I think, taking care of these kids is going to be difficult for him. So how about us, we go and we take one of his children and raise them as our own, and see what can come of that. So Abbas said that's a very noble idea. So what is the Prophet ﷺ doing here? What is he doing? So when he had no one, who was there? Abu Talib. So he is thinking about the natural response, the care that you would give to someone that has cared for you so much. You feel like you owe them, and it's so true. So he's just thinking about this. He gets Abbas. He says, "Let's go see what we can do." So they went and they sat down with him, and because Abbas is this brother and all of that, he's talking to Abu Talib, and he's saying, "You know what? We were thinking and all of this. It's not Muhammad's idea, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's basically Abbas is presenting it as his idea because of the culture, elder and all of that." So he's saying, we would really like to help you out and try to help you with the boys here. And so he said, okay, fine. If you really feel like you could help me out with this, and I'd be definitely appreciate that. If you pick whichever one. And so then the Prophet ﷺ said, I would like to have Ali, the younger one, in my presence. And so then he said, okay, and he took Ja'far. So Ja'far ibn Abi Talib was raised in the house of Abbas, and Ali was raised in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. So, I actually did not know this, but the mother of Ali is Fatima bint Asad, bint Hashim, and she is actually became a devout Muslim. I never even knew that until I was researching this. And she was someone who we hear so much about Abu Talib. The Prophet ﷺ used to refer to ba'da ummi. He used to say, this is my mother after my mother. Because Barakah had that first place, which she was the Habashi servant, and she played that role, and she breastfed him and took care of him and all of that. But actually, in the house, they had a very deep connection between Ali's mother and the Prophet ﷺ growing up. And so basically, the Prophet ﷺ, as he's growing up and he is, being around her, she very much recognized his unique status as a child, how he was. And she was very, adamant about praising him to everyone, particularly her husband, Abu Talib. And so it seems like the secret behind Abu Talib's deep desire to defend and care and protect the Prophet ﷺ was actually probably more his wife telling him about how special this child is and how unique he is. And so as she got older, and then whenever, after Abu Talib had passed, she became a believer and all of that, and she, she narrated some hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So she was excited that the Prophet ﷺ would take in her son Ali. Because who better than us to raise him is this young man that has grown up to become such a special person himself. And so there's this big debate, when did she die and how did it happen? But we know for sure that the Prophet ﷺ prayed a special janazah prayer for her. But there's some very weak hadiths with lots of issues, a couple of them that narrate about when and how did it happen and all these things the Prophet ﷺ supposedly said and did. And that may be from people who exaggerated. And it's natural. When you love somebody, when you have a love and a deep spiritual connection with someone, it's natural for you to just kind of put everything you've got into it. And we've had this, people want to get into the whole divide of the historical legacy of Islam. But it happens even, I'll never forget when I was studying the Hanbali Madhab, my Shaykh said, now Imam Ahmad, you have to agree, before we begin this whole journey of studying the fiqh, you have to admit and agree, Imam Ahmad is Imam Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And he started talking about, he memorized a million hadith and all of this. And so, while that sounds great and all, mashallah, and he was a great scholar and above most, I think people have this natural tendency to want to exaggerate about people they love. I mean, you hear things like Imam Shafi is reading the whole Quran twice every day in Ramadan. Like if you break that down, it's like 20 hours, he's sleeping 4 hours and reading Quran 20 hours. If you're going to do that, it's going to be very difficult. But that khatam in the most reasonable, discernible way is going to take you 10 hours. Okay? So that's 20 hours for 2 khatams. It's absolutely almost ridiculous and not possible. But people have said that, and you read it in all the books, you read it in the khutab, in the Muslim world, I can remember hearing that many Ramadans, while I was in the Muslim world. And Imam al-Shafi'i, and so they have it. So when they talked about the Prophet ﷺ and Ali and his family, these are the closest people to him. So it's natural for people to exaggerate about their reality because they love them so much. And we have it now, some of the people with their sheikh, and they think about their sheikh in a certain way. We need to be careful. So, he had these brothers. Talib, unfortunately his oldest brother, died as a disbeliever right after Badr. The story is that he was kind of pushed to go to Badr, that his uncle Abbas did not want to go to Badr, but they were all pushed. Particularly the family of the Prophet ﷺ, even they were clearly disbelievers. They were not believers. They were not saying I believe. They weren't even saying things like, be nice to them and all that. They were just staying neutral. So because they were neutral, there was a big push from Abu Jahl that everybody from Banu Hashim is to be in this battle at Badr. Okay? So some stories said that he was taken as a captive along with Abbas, and then he came back. He got very sick. Ali's older brother Talib, and he came back and he died. Now Aqil, who stayed in the house with Abu Talib, he actually became a believer in the year of the Fath. He embraced Islam after 21 years of the prophethood. After many years, 8, 9 years of hijrah, then the Prophet ﷺ came with all of the people, and they've brought this huge authority of faith and unity amongst the people who used to be very divided tribes and very scattered and very disorganized. Now they're all under one banner, under one moral system, under one belief system, and they're coming. So now here Aqil says, now I believe, right? Now some people say because Abbas was there too, that they were hiding their belief. But we have a principle in Islamic law that's very important that we should carry everywhere we go, because Muslims love conspiracy theories. Okay, and that is نَحْكُمْ عَلَى النَّاسِ عَلَى ظَوَاهِرِهِمْ. We take a judgment about somebody the way they come, the way they are, what they say, what they do, we take them as their word. We have no way to go in and say, here's what they're really thinking. Here's what they're really about. Here's what their real intentions are. There's no way for anybody to do that. This is completely against the prophetic example and guidance, yes?
Also, Abbas had a very prosperous partnership with Abu Sufyan, and he wanted to keep that very successful partnership, so that...
Exactly. Yeah, so some of them had many interests and many reasons why they were in Mecca, but we can just say what we know, and this is a principle that carries. What we know about people who, when they died, they were saying, I'm a disbeliever and all of this, so there's ahkam for us, the rulings for how we deal with people, and then God and His knowledge. So it's not our place to say who went to heaven and who went to hell. We don't know that. A lot of Muslims go overboard and say, oh, this is that, that. I'll never forget, I watched this debate happen because I went overboard. I had two sheikhs in Islamic American University a long time ago, and one sheikh, we sat and we listened to him about Hafiz al-Asr, the Bashar's dad, and all of the evil and oppression and tyranny and murder and so forth that he did in Syria. And that he was from this sect and all of that and so forth. And so somebody had mentioned something about him, and I said that he was a disbeliever. So one of my teachers said, do you know that for sure? And I said, well, look at all the things he did and what group he was with. He said, I read in a book by Sheikh Ramadan Buti, who was a great scholar, we all learned from his great scholarly works, that he had made repentance before he died, and so that's it. So let's leave it to Allah. What benefit do I gain at all by deciding about someone's faith and spirituality in this life or the hereafter? And there's a famous hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever would say this one's a disbeliever or that one's a rebellious one, and then it will either be one of the two. Meaning if it's not that person, now you have brought that upon yourself. So this way of thinking is very un-Islamic, right? To just judge people's hearts and all of that. So what we know about his older brother Talib, he died as a disbeliever. You will read some things in some works, I'm not going to name groups because that's counterproductive, that they will say like all of them are believers and Abu Talib was a believer, everybody's a believer, because they were close to the Prophet ﷺ. And that's fine if you want to think that yourself, but we need to just take them at the word and let who be the judge? Allah, right? So what we know is that Aqil, he became a Muslim after the year of the Fatah, when the Muslims came back. So Ja'far, we know his story. An amazing, devout believer. He left the house of Abbas. And this is interesting because when you read it here, he left the house of Abbas because he was feeling some pressure at the beginning. Don't follow this religion. So that was there at the beginning, just so we're clear on that. And so he left, and then because his dad would not protect him, that's why he had to go to the hijrah to Habasha. He was their leader. So he went there and he stayed for a long time, and actually some of the narrations reported that it was his interaction with Najashi on a regular basis that led the Najashi, the king, to become a believer. And actually it says, and many in his court became believers along with him because of the work of Ja'far. And we know that he died in the battle of Mu'tah in Sham. So Hani, that was his sister. Hani became a believer, and she narrated many hadith in the Sahih Sitta. I did not know Hani. So she was one of the sisters of Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anhu. She was a believer, and then now we get to, I did not know this. So let's take a guess. How many wives did Ali ibn Abi Talib have, radiallahu anhu? He had how many?
4.
Nope. He had 9 wives, mashallah.
All after Fatima.
Yeah, after Fatima. But after Fatima, he had many at one time. And he had Ma Malakat Aymanakum. He was also very comfortable with that. And Ali ibn Abi Talib had, are you ready for this? 14 boys and 19 girls. Children. Who can do the math? 33 kids he had.
Whoa.
MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. So Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, he got married young, and according to the divine law, he felt comfortable and had the energy to have a big giant family. MashaAllah. I can imagine how you would followed up with these people. But now it's easy to see, and this is what's weird. Because if you look at the names of many of his children that are well established with very strong, he named his son Abu Bakr, he named his son Umar, he named his son Uthman, right? Why is he naming them this if they're enemies? The story that we've been given by some people, right? And so he even married Umar's daughter. If you hate Umar, which is the teaching of some people who think they love Ali, if you hate Umar, you will not marry his daughter. I will not want to marry the daughter of the guy I hate. No way. If he has been the main source of the disruption of the healthy move forward of the ummah, if he's been the main disruptor, why would I do that? So, radiallahu anh, that's his situation. So how did Ali radiallahu anh look like? So Ali, I did not know this, he was a medium stature, but for Arabs that would have been about 5'8", 5'9", okay? And he was bald. He just had the hair in the back here. And he had a big beard. And he also had a big belly. Dakhm al-Batan. Ibn Abdul Bar is a great historian. I was like, is this thing? But he was also very strong. He had very strong arms and very big hands and very big. And that even though he was mid-sized, he was a very courageous guy. The face, they said the women that married him, just so you can see, they said that his face was like al-Badr, Laylat al-Badr, like al-Qamar Laylat al-Badr. That his moon was this shining, bright, beautiful thing. So he had a very handsome face. But he had a very strong build to him, radiallahu anh. But it says, دَخَلَ الْحَرْبَ هَرْوَلَةً. He went in there moving fast. And whenever the battle happened, he would go on the front, in front of everyone, and just go in there. And people would be scared of him. Even though he's not a big, tall, or giant man, he was just a very courageous man. So how did he become Muslim? Okay, so as we said, that's how he was living with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When you look at how he became Muslim, it's a very, I did not know this story, that he sees that Khadija and the Prophet ﷺ are praying together. And it says yusalliyan, but obviously it's not like salah because he just got the revelation. So I think that basically they're making some sort of prayer. Because salah means dua originally, beforehand. But it became specifically to the movements in the Qibla and all of that after the revelation had made this term known. So he saw them and then he asked them about it. And the Prophet ﷺ responded to him in this hadith here that, I have been chosen as the great-grandson of Abraham to complete this message, and I am the messenger of God, and I am sent to teach people about the hereafter and accountability and prophethood and all of this. So who knows what Ali's response was? Ali said, I've never heard anything like this before. I'm going to have to talk to my dad about it. That was his response. This is the most authentic narration about the story. It's in Bidayah wa Nihaya, Ibn Kathir. He said, I'm going to have to go talk to my dad because I've never heard of anything like this. Which proves that the Arabs did not know of these things. Prophethood and prophets and all that. This story is just as weird as Muslims are in America, what Islam is and all that. To the average American, I have no idea. Most of them think we're like Hindus or something, right? Actually, growing up in Oklahoma, when I thought about Muslims, I thought Hindus, Muslims, same thing. Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, all that's one thing, right? Those are the Eastern people, weird, I thought they're all the ones with the dot. Right? In my mind, that's how I looked at it as a guy from Oklahoma. So they're looking at something Christian and Jew as like some weird thing from way over there in Sham, right? This is something very strange and they don't interact with it, they don't know these people. So he said about it. So then the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Ali, إِذَا لَمْ تُسْلِمْ فَكْتُمْ. If you're not going to embrace what I tell you, please keep it to yourself. He said, this is some heavy stuff. And at this point, the Prophet has only been told to talk to the people closest to him that he knows and to keep it as an inner circle secret. So Ali spent the whole night thinking about this thing. And for sure, he's thinking about what he said and he's thinking about who is saying it. And this is very important when we talk about Dala'il al-Nubuwah. A lot of people think, yeah, whatever. But if you look at it, the Prophet ﷺ was a person who was so, his integrity was unquestionable, so honest and genuine and trustworthy. He was never known, nobody ever heard him, when Abu Sufyan went all the way to meet Heraclius in Sham, the Eastern Byzantine ruler. He said, tell me about this guy. And Abu Sufyan said to himself, I know that I have to say the truth because he was never known to lie. And if I say that, people are with me, they know I'm a liar, and then the whole thing becomes like a battle of lies. So I have to stand with what I know, because people will call me on it, right? So the Prophet ﷺ is that way. And he's also a person that was known to be arbitrary. Not arbitrary, that's not a good word, because that means something else. He had a arbitrational. He would help people come to terms. People would like for him to be there to help, clear out the problems that happen between them. Mediator, thank you. I'm still fasting, I'm trying to come up with this word. So, the Prophet ﷺ, he's saying right now, keep it silent. Why? Why is he saying keep it silent? Because it's dated, it could cause some conflict. And he has spoke with his cousin. His cousin said the people will flip out and kick you out of your land and turn on you. That's what he said. He's like, really? Right? So he knows this, right? His nature is he would not continue with this if he thinks that's what's going to happen. Prophet has always been one to keep the peace. Let's keep the peace, all of that. Let's keep a healthy social frame and network amongst us. So Ali thought about it all night. He came to the Prophet ﷺ in the morning. He said, no, he said, what are you asking me to do? What do I have to do to become a believer? He said, Tashhad an la ilaha illallah wa anna Rasulullah. You will say that God is one and there's no deity other than Him, and I am His messenger. And so he immediately testified of that. And he kept it silent. And so he did not tell Abu Talib about this. When he would go visit with him, he would not let him know his own dad. So we see immediately the issue of wilayah comes in. So the concept of guardianship, the concept of loyalty. So technically his dad does have a final authority. He's like 10 years old. But he has embraced the Prophet ﷺ. He understands that takes precedence over that. So he has no problem, going on about his business. And so him and the Prophet ﷺ, they used to go and they used to make some prayers after some time. And one time Abu Talib comes out there and he's just traveling outside of the city, and he sees his son walking over a hill valley. He goes over there, catches up, what are you doing? He said, Wallahi, my father, Abi, I have come to find out that he is the messenger of God, and I'm following him, and I'm following him in religion and this lifestyle. And so I will pray, I keep up prayers, I believe in the oneness of God and all of this. So he told him, he said, son, this is a dangerous idea. He said, Muhammad is a very good man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the idea is very good to come as a problem. And he's talking to him, he's a kid. Any father would talk to their child if they felt that way. And he's stuck in that cultural mindset of religiosity. Is that my religion is tied in with my people and the way I was raised and how people expect and the social shame and expectations and all of these things. So finally he just told him, look, he said, if you want to do that, as he said, keep it to yourself. Don't tell anybody else until he tells you that it's comfortable. There are some strange narrations that the Prophet ﷺ and Ali went and destroyed some of the idols of the Kaaba. These are very weak narrations and they're not reliable, so that is not true. Similarly, when Abu Talib died and his last words was, I'm following the religion of my father, which was polytheism. So we say we can't bury him as a believer and we take him as a disbeliever. Now, what was in his heart and all of that, and what Allah is going to do with him on there, I don't know for sure. But what we know is what he said is doomed. It's a very terrible statement to leave on, right? But I'm not the judge. But yet, while I was in Kuwait, I read it was like a 60-page booklet with all these details criticizing hadith in Sahih Muslim that Abu Talib goes to heaven. He's in heaven. Okay. So did the parents of the Prophet ﷺ, even though he had made what he said. So I think we'll conclude from there for today, inshallah. We'll carry on from there, going into his young years as a Muslim and what he represented amongst these older believers. So inshallah, next Sunday we'll carry on with this one, inshallah. Jazakumullah.
So last uncle, I mean, Hamza was a believer.
Yeah, he became